From a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, the latest on DNA splicing, because who doesn't want to bring back those giant short-faced bears?
What?
And now, the podcast host who steers clear of bears because he knows full well they will eat his face, Pete Dominic!
Yeah, that's right, Pete Co. Thank you very much once again for another amazing introduction. I am so glad to have you in my corner, you talented son of a bitch. If you'd like to hire Pete Co. to do a voiceover or be an announcer or whatever, go to @PeteCoVO. And of course, you're listening to the music of the great John Carroll, who is an Emmy Award-winning singer-songwriter, wrote this song for us. So many listeners who also contribute to this podcast in so many ways. We'd love to have your support. So if you're not already a subscriber, join us now. Go to standupwithpete.com and sign up. I have an awesome show for you today because I have two great guests joining me, two great conversations. Coming up later, Michael Cohen, formerly columnist of the Boston Globe, writer, author, essayist, thinker. Always have a great conversation with him. We go over all of the latest important stories in the world of American politics and beyond. But before that, I have a wonderful, personal, thoughtful conversation with my friend Nayyera Haq about parenting, about loss, perspective, and more. So a personal and thoughtful conversation that I think is inspiring and thought-provoking with Nyyera. If you want to skip ahead past the news, although I've got some great stuff in here, especially on the codifying of marriage equality, some great sound bites. But if you want to jump ahead, Nyyera and I start about 15 minutes, and Michael Cohen and I start about 50 minutes. But first, here is yesterday's news, what's taken place in the last 24 hours. As of late Tuesday, December 13th, this is, of course, the Wednesday show. Now I'm seeing more details coming out from Talking Points memo. Great job over there by Josh Marshall and reporter Hunter Walker to reveal these new details from the texts between Trump's final chief of staff and zookeeper Mark Meadows that reveal discussions between Republican congressmen and their plans for overturning the 2020 election. Some insisting, of course, on a military coup. You saw they were calling for martial law, but they spelled it wrong, these idiots. And a lot of con law scholars were joking, well, I'd be good with Thurgood Marshall, because that's the way they spelled it, law, but not martial law, which would be basically a military coup that Republicans in Congress are apparently texting Mark Meadows, asking him to maybe think about conducting martial law. No, thank you. Anyway, special counsel Jack Smith seems to be moving fast as he can on the investigations to Trump that he's running. He subpoenaed election officials in Nevada, New Mexico, and Georgia for all communications involving Donald Trump. So that can get pretty interesting very quickly. I think Taint Week could be exciting this year, folks. That's the week between Christmas and New Year's I like to celebrate. The January 6th committee, by the way, is holding its final public meeting this Monday. It'll vote whether on not to refer any individuals to the Justice Department for prosecution. All right, now here's some good news that is probably going to go undercovered. Inflation rose less than expected in November, and probably won't see banner headlines about it, but that's really good news. Who gets the credit? Not the same people that got the blame, right? Also, negotiators in Congress are announcing a bipartisan framework agreement for government funding package that might keep the government open, although tenuous, not get your hopes up. And yesterday, this is terrible. This is just awful. Florida governor and chief conspiracy creationist Ron DeSantis got his quack surgeon general and a bunch of other ducks who call themselves scientists and doctors together, and they did a big Zoom talk, and they televised it, made a big thing of it. This is what he does. And they announced that he's going to ask the Supreme Court to convene a grand jury to look into crimes that were never occurred in an effort to sow doubt the most important miracle of science outside of water sanitation, vaccines. So this should be a fun thing in time to have to pursue and endure. I talk more with Michael Cohen about that coming up. Also saw that the U.S. sending Patriot missile defense systems to Ukraine. Russians will, of course, see this as an escalation, and I'm not sure how to feel about it other than fuck Putin and the Russians and anyone else supporting them for this horrible invasion and war they've inflicted on the Ukrainian people for the last 10 months. It's been absolutely horrific. Hundreds of thousands of people, many innocent civilians have died. By the way, that's exactly how I felt about our invasion of Iraq, just to be consistent. But the big news that I wanted to share with you is that Smart Food, the popcorn maker, you know, the bagged popcorn Smart Food. I like the cheese popcorn selection. Well, I saw it yesterday as the grocery store doing my thing, and I saw that Smart Food has collaborated with legendary cereal militiaman Captain Crunch to give us a nightmare holiday-inspired selection they're selling as Crunch Berries Popcorn Mix. That's right. It's real. This is real news, not fake news. I saw it. And those of you who are even thinking of purchasing this, you need to think twice, is what I'm going to say. You're all monsters. No. The real big news, of course, is that yesterday Joe Biden signed into law the codification of gay marriage and interracial marriage as well. Huge news. Here's the president yesterday at the signing ceremony on a cold December day, filled with a lot of joy around it and around him.
Anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, they're all connected. But the antidote to hate is love. This law and the love it defends strike a blow against hate in all its forms. And that's why this law matters to every single American, no matter who you are or who you love. This shouldn't be about conservative or liberal, red or blue. No, this is about realizing the promise of the Declaration of Independence, a promise rooted in a sacred and secular beliefs, a promise that we're all created equal. We're all entitled to what Abraham Lincoln called an open field and a fair chance. You know, there's nothing more decent, more dignified, more American that we're about what we're doing here today. It's about who we are as a nation. It's about the substance of our laws. It's about being true to the best of the soul of America. Decency, dignity, love.
That's just part of it. That's President Biden yesterday in the Rose Garden signing the bill codifying gay marriage into law, wearing his aviator glasses. Well written, well delivered. And now here is a little bit more. Here is Democrat Richie Torres of New York City, and he was on the House floor talking about why this was important the other day.
Madam Speaker, I dedicate my remarks to two civil rights icons, Edith and Judith Windsor. Today, we repeal the Defense of Marriage Act, which degraded marriage under the pretense of defending it. Today, we put the equality of same-sex love in its rightful place, under the protection of federal law. We will not leave it to the forces of hate and the relics of the past to be the final word on the fate of love. We in the LGBTQ community will be the arbiters of our own legal equality and the authors of our own marital destiny. Our equal right to marry the people that we love, in the country that we love, with the pride that we love. Today, that right makes America a more perfect union.
Yeah, Congressman Richie Torres, very well delivered right there in the House floor, on the House floor a couple days ago. And, of course, here is Transportation Secretary, former mayor of South Bend, Indiana. It's Pete Buttigieg with his husband, Chasten, and they were talking about this on, I don't know, this is a video I guess they made and posted on their social media networks. I thought this was good.
Chasten and I are here at the White House celebrating the president signing the Respect for Marriage Act. This is long-needed federal legislation. It protects the rights of same-sex married couples and interracial couples. And it's bringing peace of mind and much-needed protections to millions of American families, including ours.
What an honor it is to be here to see the president sign this bill, and great to see Congress catch up with the American people. Whether it's taking care of the person that we love, taking care of our parents, or taking care of our children, this will bring peace of mind to families like ours and millions across the country. And it's just a really happy day here at the White House to see this done.
It is. I'm so grateful to everybody from advocates to leaders in the House and Senate to our president for bringing this day about. And again, just great news for so many Americans.
Okay, of course, this law was sadly necessary because the Supreme Court overturned a woman's right to abortion, and a bunch of states then outlawed it. That was the concern here. And, of course, Justice Thomas and others said they might even think about doing this, overturning marriage equality and then sending that back to the states the same way they did abortion. Well, now they can still do that. You don't have to marry. I mean, if they decide to do this, if the Supreme Court does it, and if these red states who have taken women's rights away now want to take gay rights away as well, they could do it, but they would not be allowed to take away the rights of those married in states where it's still legal. They would have to afford them their rights. So I think I explained that well. Here's a little bit more from Pete Buttigieg on CNN talking about this yesterday.
This changes that. It says, as a matter of law, that no matter what the court does, we wouldn't have to, for example, worry about which state we were traveling to know whether we would be able to, in an emergency, catch up to one another in a hospital. And by the way, that's not a theoretical experience for us or for millions of Americans. You know, last year, when our son was hospitalized, I was able to catch up to Chasten, and he was able to relieve me as we took turns being at our son's bedside 24/7. Those are the kinds of things that are at stake in making sure that marriage is uniformly protected across the country. Things like doing your taxes and really just ordinary everyday things. But I think the most basic thing is that certainty, that comfort that comes with knowing that it isn't just the academic opinions of 9 justices that keeps your family intact. It's also a law, a decision that has been made by our democratic institutions, our Congress and our president. There's a long way to go in terms of protections. We still need an Equality Act that says that you can't discriminate against somebody in this country based on who they are, who they love. But this is really a momentous day. And the last thing I would add here is it also signals Washington catching up with the American people. 70% of Americans already respect marriage equality. This is just making sure the law of the land does the same.
I got to play just 2 more clips on this. This is such an important issue to me. I have been talking about this, arguing about this, advocating for folks on this my entire career. And really, my whole life, I've been involved in the civil rights movement, the human rights movement for gay people. And I've just always gotten so emotional about it. It's always been pretty simple thing to me and not controversial. It was never something that I had to evolve on or overcome trying to understand. And no judgment to those who did have to evolve on it, who were taught something different. I think you folks are better than me. And so it's an important thing. And so 2 more quick clips on it, and then we'll get to a very thoughtful conversation with Nayyera Haq and then Michael Cohen. But here's Congressman Jamie Raskin making kind of a great legal defense constitutional argument for this from a couple days ago. Video he made.
The church decides who's going to get married in the church hall, and the Constitution decides who's going to get married in City Hall. So you might not like same-sex marriages, you might not like interracial marriages, you might not like interfaith marriages. Fine, but under the law, everybody's got the right to do it. And you can join whatever church you want, and that church can make whatever decisions it wants about who to marry and who not to marry. So I've not heard a single credible or coherent objection to this compromise that came out of the Senate. And I would hope that we would give it our unanimous support and bring it to the floor. And I would hope that the House could unanimously endorse it, because this is precisely the compromise that is contemplated by the framers of the Constitution. Remember, when we take our oath of office, we put our hand on the Bible and we swear to uphold the Constitution. We don't put our hand on the Constitution and swear to uphold the Bible.
Well said, Jamie Raskin. Well said indeed. All right. Well, I just wanted to give you some of the headlines and, of course, some context, some audio on that historic signing of that bill yesterday. There's a lot to be happy about. Now, coming up, Michael Cohen. But first, I've got Nayyera Haq, who I'd reached out to talk about the Brittany Griner situation and so many other issues that I want to discuss. Always great to talk with her about anything, but we proved that today, because when I reached out to Nyyera, she said, hey, I just serendipitous that you reached out to me. I would love to talk with you about some of the stuff that I've been experiencing over the last 10 days. And she talked about a loss that she suffered. And then she talked about attending a reunion. She talked about parenting and teaching life and death to her 6-year-old. And it's a great conversation. I love Nyyera. I think she's super smart. I learn a lot from her in so many ways. And I love watching her come of age as a parent, as a mom with her amazing husband. And I just think this is a great personal conversation, which hopefully you're in the mood for. And you're listening. Let's listen to Cyndi Lauper play True Colors in the Rose Garden yesterday as a way to get into this, because I thought it was great. But look Nyyera up, follow her on Twitter, and support her on all the social medias and things that Nyyera is doing right now as she tries to find her new main thing. You can hear her sitting in on SiriusXM and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Nayyera Haq right now. Nyyera, thank you very much for joining me. I'm very happy to have you, and I always love our conversations. We have a lot to talk about. Hi.
Yeah, it's been a couple of days. Good to see you, Pete.
So I reached out to you because I wanted to talk with you about, well, we can always talk about anything, and I'm always open to talk about anything, especially with someone like you, if you have a thing. But what you said to me in a text was, I've actually had a crazy 10 days of reflecting on life stuff. Death of someone close to me, 20-year work reunion, and I'm shockingly feeling good about it. Is this what maturity feels like? And I'm like, can we talk about that? And you said, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're very lucky, Pete, that you and I get to do that, sharing thoughts and feelings and respecting it, but also, bringing other people into it. Because I do feel like today, when you reached out, I was like, clearly I was meant to talk to Pete today and share the stories, because I'm just sitting here on my day off, clear schedule, staring at the ceiling, like, what just happened in my life?
Well, the reason I like to record these conversations and share them with people is because it gives other people permission to feel their feelings as well as ideas. It gives me ideas on how to feel about things in life. That's why I think a conversation like this is important. So thank you for feeling safe to have it with me. And okay, so I've told people just a little bit. Your parents are in Pakistan visiting, and while they are there, your dad's best friend of 50 years, who you're very close with, who you named your kid after, passed away suddenly or post-surgery. And this is a horrible thing, and we're very sorry for your loss. Tell me, though, about your dad and his relationship and how well you knew this guy. Sounds like he was like a family member to you.
Yes. And we call him uncle, which is something that South Asians, and I think Asians in general, do often. You give honorifics, but truly felt like he was my dad's brother because he was my dad's roommate in med school. When they both moved to the United States in their early 20s, they became roommates in residency. So they were the young 20s immigrant dudes, single, working all the time, figuring life out together. And when my uncle got married, my dad got engaged. And so when my uncle moved out, so my mom could move in, he took his twin bed and my dad's twin bed, and they put them together until my parents could afford a big bed of their own. Right? It is that level of history and knowing somebody. And I have seen him throughout my life, all my life, but I've seen him as that person, that friend who calls my dad and is like, yo, I haven't heard from you in a couple of months. Dude, what's going on? And I knew he was on the phone with him because I could hear my dad do this particular type of laugh and chuckle, like, all right, you kind of told me about myself. I get it. I've gotten into my own little bubble. And so he was that friend for 50 years who made sure my dad was social, my dad was okay. And he would drive the 6 hours, 7 hours or whatever from West Virginia to New York to see my dad, to see us, to check in with the kids, to know what we're doing. And fast forward to when I'm in my late 20s and I now live in the DC area. I've been working on Capitol Hill. I've been working in the administration and the White House, very political career at that point. And this uncle had been told by my dad that I was in a relationship that my parents were struggling with. And so my uncle calls me up. It's like, hey, I'm in town. Can I take you to dinner? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to see you. It's been so long. And we sit down for dinner and he just starts telling me about his marriage and his life journey and how he met his wife. And they were a love match. And I say that with that heavy accent, love match, because that was a thing back then when you chose your own partner. And the ups and downs they had as a result. And it was the first time that I was able to talk to someone of my parents' generation from their background and their experience who talked to me like a grown-ass adult, not the kid, not the daughter,
right?
Like real talk of like, let's really think and consider what you're dealing with right now, where you're trying to go with this. And so, yes, it was kind of when I knew I was pregnant, married the guy, everybody is celebrating, and my uncle got to see a good start to our life, that we were happy. And so we knew we were having a son, and we had some names picked out. And when we looked at this boy, all pink and just bright eyed, we're like, that name means something to us because of who this person is, how they show up in life, but also who he's been to us. We're going to give our kid that name. And so we can tell him this story one day of why he has that name. And that person is gone. That person's gone now.
Do you want to speak his name, or are you protecting it?
Because I always refer to my kid as the kid.
I see the complication. So saying your uncle's name would expose your son's name.
Yeah.
Got it.
I can tell you what the name means. It is a name it is an Arabic name that also is Swahili. It means scholar. It means kingly, deep, thoughtful person. And it's a name that combined African-American cultures, Pakistani, Muslim, like all of the identities are combined in the name, which was meaningful for us with what we were trying to pass on of our heritage.
Sadly, your son, if I have this right, has none of those qualities. He's really not living up to any of it.
Nothing at all. And I'm working with the acceptance of that. So,
I mean, it is kind of like, hey, listen, the expectation is that you're scholarly and kingly. So,
yeah, so he's a jock, plays all the sports. That's all he wants to do is run around with a football and a baseball. And, his one line is like, I don't want to talk about it. He's 6. He's already figured out to say, I'll ask him a question. How are you feeling about that? I don't want to talk about it. Hates books. Oh, learning to read. He's frustrated. He can't quite read yet. So yeah, I listen, I didn't name him Chastity, right? Because that's really setting your kid up for failure.
No, but that's enough about my daughter. Okay, so tell me about, he passes away and your parents are in Pakistan, and now you're like, you had to tell your dad, how did your dad find out? And basically, these last several days of your life have been a real up and down, because you were also you were at a reunion, which is, just take a pause for all the emotions about any type of reunion, but a work reunion. Now I'll get more specific, at the Capitol. Now I'll get more specific, with Nancy Pelosi, who you used to work for. So you lose your uncle, you got to deal with your parents, your dad's loss, and then you're going down, oh my gosh, and you're still pieced together, and you have these little kids that you're dealing with in a marriage.
Yeah, all the things. I'm just I'm reflecting on it. I'm like, what happened last weekend? And I will be the first one to admit I am expert at compartmentalizing. Over here, this is the crisis we're going to deal with now. Okay, this is the next thing we're going to deal with. And then maybe some point later, when we're ready, we'll deal with emotion, right? We'll deal with that. So my uncle had come out of a transplant surgery, and had been fine. So that's when my dad had talked to him. He talked to him before surgery. He talked to him after. So they're like, okay, overseas, we're good. And then we start hearing that he's not doing well. I check in with the daughter of my uncle's daughter, and I decide I'm going to go down. I'm going to see him for the weekend because he is now effectively on life support. He's out. He's on life support. I'm going to go. I'm going to report back to my parents. I was like, hey, I think this strikes me as a situation that you need to get on the next flight. Right. I was like, really? He's like, well, goes through the medical analysis. He's like, there's not really anything I can do if I'm there. And I said, I know you and I can do this thing where we can deal with a situation and work it. But I'm just asking you to consider, as the best friend, not the doctor, as the best friend, what it is that you want to do and that you won't regret. He's like, Okay, I'll think about that. So they do. The next day they get a flight, but it's 27 hours.
That's how you talk to your dad?
Yeah, now.
Okay.
Yeah. 27 hours, right? From takeoff to landing here in my house, go to pick him up at the airport. And he takes off, and the MRI are showing the brain's perfectly fine. And so he takes off with hope that when he gets here, his best friend is going to come out of sedation and talk to him again. And he lands and he comes, and we connect with the family, and we find out, and he's in my house with me as he discovers that actually the second scan showed extreme damage and there's no recovery. So I was imagining what that flight must have been like. 27 hours, right? And I tell my mom that, I was like, just to go from clinical understanding to hope to then reality, right? And I'm glad I was here with them for that.
Yeah.
Because I do think, and I see this with my own child, that there is something in these moments of life and death of seeing your legacy, like seeing what's ahead, like seeing what you're leaving behind.
How did you decide to deal with that? I know you told me a little bit before I hit record with your 6-year-old. You saw that as an opportunity to have a conversation, start a conversation about life and death.
He has known that there is a thing that death happens, and we've told him that bodies don't last forever. Sometimes they stop working when people are very, very old. But they stop working, and they're the part of you that is you and your personality. We call it the soul. People call it different things, and that part goes back to God. And that's part of the life. And I fucking love kindergarten, because they like raise chicks, and chicks grow and they die, and they normalize this kind of thing, right? Like, he's had a toad that's died, like animals die. This was the first time he'd had to apply it to somebody he kind of knew.
Right.
And my mom was like, no, don't, really, he shouldn't go to the burial. Like, you shouldn't take him. I'm like, no, I think this is important. My dad's like, you're sure he's up for this? It could be really hard and really scary. I'm like, yeah, that whole, like, let's not look at emotion and let's not show like young kids that it happens. I think that's a problem. I think that's something we're trying to change. And I said, no, we've talked to him about it, and he'll have questions. And we've told him it's okay to be sad, and that he may see you all being sad, but it's important. These are the things that you show up for. And this is what you do. This is what showing up looks like.
That's wonderful.
So, but again, this is literally the person in my life who showed us this is what showing up looks like. How do I not do that for him? And how do I not pass that on to the kid I named after him?
Right. Yeah, no, I love that.
To me, it was so clear what I had to do. And the only thing that made sense to make sense and something good come out of this moment. That was it.
And how did your child person deal with it?
So when I told him the week before that I was going to go visit my uncle to see, and he's like, "Oh, well, can I see his soul go to God? Can I see that happen?" I'm like, we kind of don't see that, and also I don't know.
I love it.
But like, okay, that like, right, like that sound, I've made it so normal that like, why wouldn't that be amazing? Like, kind of doesn't work like that. And I don't know if they're going to allow kids there, but I'll let you know. We don't really get to see it. I said, but what does happen is generally it looks like the person goes to sleep, and then that's it. Their body becomes very still. Okay.
I like the idea at like the end of the original Star Wars when Ben Kenobi's gets killed. Darth Vader kills him. He's like, I'll be more powerful in death or whatever than I ever was. And then his cloak just falls to the ground. I liked that, to visualize that as a kid. Like your clothes just fall.
He has seen all the Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. He's thinking about that.
I would not be surprised if he has already made that connection.
Yeah.
And yeah, wow. Because I remember watching it with him, be like, oh, whoa, how is he going to react to this? And he was just like, do. Like, okay, got it. That's what happened next. Cool, got it. And then, of course, you see the spirit of Ben pop up over and over again. So he's like, oh, this is fine. It just comes up as a ghost. Cool.
Yeah. Just if I need any advice, if my parents died, they'll come back in ghost form and whisper in my ear like in Superman, too.
I'm cool with that. All right, I'm down with that. He did get a little spooked on Saturday morning, which was the day of the burial, and he knew we were going to go. And he's like, I don't want to go. I said, all right, tell me why. Tell me why you want to go. He's like, oh, it's a little scary. I'm like, what's scary? He's like, you might become a zombie. Oh. Well, that is a very healthy fear. You should be afraid of zombies.
Sure.
But zombies aren't real. I don't know, Mom. the zombies are real. I said, oh, they're only in movies. We've never seen them. I was like, no, really, seriously, kid. They're not like, no, I've never seen one. Daddy's never seen, nobody here. You can ask anybody and they will tell you they have not seen a zombie. It's like, yeah, I guess if they'd seen zombies, somebody would have told the news by now. Right.
I would have, I can't even believe that, like, this is how my brain thinks, but I've done this and I've like disappointed and frustrated parents. Like, if I was there and you would have said, ask anybody, there's no zombies. And if you had asked me, I would have been like, I've seen one and I've seen a werewolf. And your kid would just be, and you'd be like, looking at me like, what did you just do? And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I think it's funny.
Well, what I really wanted to do when he was in the car ride over, he's like, okay, so like, what if Uncle actually came back as a zombie? I think he might. And I said, and my husband's like driving. He's like, do not say that while you're there. And I said, hey, fine. You could say that in the car. I just don't think you say that to the family because they'll be sad. It's their dad, right? And he's like, I don't know if I think that's kind. I was like, but what do you, I was like, okay, so you could talk about it here. And he's like, but yeah, I could kill him. I could beat him.
It's so.
I'm like, how? Wait, what do you mean? He's like, well, because zombies are slow. They're really slow. Yeah. And then, all they are is bones. They fall apart. And I am trying so hard to not argue with him.
Yeah.
There's different kinds of zombies. How do you know you're going to do a kill shot? Like, they might just run up to you and latch onto you. Like, you don't know what kind of zombie's really going to happen. I'm like, just quiet. This is not that moment. This is not the moment to engage in zombie talk and explain to him the different layers. And there's a survival guide that you need to study. I'm just like, just stop. Let him have his moment. And he did ask if he could put some dirt on the grave.
All right.
He wanted to do that. And he asked if he could see. And I said, sure. I said, whatever you want. And he was fascinated. Dad hadn't dug the grave yet. So he was fascinated by, the big backhoe loader digger, digging the grave. So it was amazing to watch it through his lens of what he was experiencing in this moment versus what I was experiencing and watching my dad and really feeling like this is what you do. Right? Like you are sad, you show up, you help comfort people who are left and you do the ritual thing that person would have wanted. Like, this is healing. This is what healing looks like. And so that's part of why I'm just really shocked. Like, I'm remarkably okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so great to hear. It's such a great experience that you had with your family that you're sharing with us. I really appreciate that. The other part of it, which is also, by the way, it reminds me of how I learned. That's how I learned that my parents wanted to be cremated. My dad didn't beat around the bush. He just tore that bandage right off because we were at a funeral. And I was like, are you guys going to be buried in the ground like that? My dad's like, your mother and I are going to be cremated. I was like, what's that? He's like, they're just ashes.
Take our body and burn it.
I was like, what? That's terrible, Dad. And he's like, that's what we want. And I was like, questions.
So this is the other thing I was thinking about. Like, how much of it should be about what we want when it's our turn to go vote versus what the survivors want?
Well, I actually talked about that with Celeste Headley, that very question, the etiquette of death and the interest of the deceased versus the interest of the living. So what do you think? What do you want? What do you think ethically?
I was wondering about that because my uncle apparently had made like no arrangements for anything. And so that was a whole nother, make sure you talk to your family and have everything in order and they know what you want, where the things are, all of that. So there's a lot of unraveling that's happening right now, even though it was sudden. Like, at some point you hit an age where you're kind of like, we got to start confronting our mortality.
You also have to have a friend who's going to clear out your internet history and certain drawers in your home. Just a little bit of advice out there, folks.
This spooked me a little bit because I had been sitting there after we all sat down together, the med school buddies and, me and my uncle's kids, and the daughters had his phone and they're scrolling through looking at photos. And apparently my uncle wasn't very technologically savvy, which I find hysterical. So he would take accidental selfies of his eyeball or he wanted to, this and that. I'm like, girls, and I'm thinking to myself, how do I tell them? I don't know if you want to go through all those photos. Like maybe there's some things we don't want to know about our parents or ever see, but I'm like, and I was like, oh, you have his phone? How'd you open that? They're like, oh, we're the ones who set the codes. He had no idea how to do that. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know how I would reckon with that. There's some things I don't want to know about my parents. Let them be adults. Let them have their thing.
Yes. For sure. It's got to be tough to find something.
I don't want to know my dad's search history ever.
No.
Ever.
Nope. No, unless you want to know, but if you really do want to know a person,
zero, la, 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 la,
that is where your reality. Okay, well, if you tell us right now, before I pivot to your reunion with Nancy Pelosi, what is something that's in your internet history that you are embarrassed by? Is it a certain item that you're shopping for? Is it a gossip piece of some sort? Is it some other kind of indulgence of yours that you wish, or is it like actually how long you spent? I spent an inordinate amount of time on this one couple's Instagram page. Like I don't need people knowing about that.
I am very rarely embarrassed about whatever I do in my life. I'm kind of like, it is what it is. Right. And I'm very transparent with my husband. It is more so like for him to see something or whatever, I'd be like, oh yeah, that is actually kind of funny and random. Right. So people I know, I don't think I'd have much embarrassment, but I do think that there are certain adult things that children should not know about their parents.
Right.
And that, privacy is important to me. So we're just going to leave it at that. That like, that's just stuff people don't need to know about.
Yeah, no, but it's just you and me. So just tell me.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Are you watching?
Did you see the skill I learned from being a diplomat of just like, here's how we're going to, we're going to wrap that conversation and make it all nice and not really say anything.
For the record, I saw that skill moments after meeting you. Okay.
But it's like I got the double whammy, diplomat and press secretary. And it's like, wait, what did you actually just say? Did you actually tell me anything? No.
I really would like to hang out with your husband and ask him how he negotiates.
Bless him.
I bet you he's learned how to negotiate from you in ways, and he knows where to take his wins and losses somehow. He
Jedi mind tricked me on our third date into continuing to date him.
How?
I had on a third date, and be like, just need to level with you, coming out of the thing, really enjoying just being my own person again and not looking to be in a relationship, blah, 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 blah. And so his version of what he was hearing me say was, he literally goes, he's like, is that what it was? Like literally 10 years later, we talk about that. He's like, is that what you're trying to do? This is what it was like for me.
She is moving her hand like a mouth motion in case.
Like, wah, 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 wah. And he's like, I'm thinking like, okay, well, I like this girl. I'm going to continue to see her. So I'm going to continue to see her. How do I get her to do that? And so how he gets me to do that is like, he says, okay. He's like, cool. So I don't need to tie you down. That's fine. He's like, you do you. Here's what I'm going to ask. I don't know any people in town and I'm new here and I feel comfortable with you. We can talk. We clearly have fun. So I'll call. And all I ask you to do is like, you don't have to pick up. You can send it to voicemail sometimes. You can pick up whenever. He's like, but I'll continue to call if that's okay. And all I ask is that you don't automatically shut me out. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
I can do that. I was like, I can do that right now. I can do. Cool. 6 months later, I'm sitting there like being like, how am I going to marry this man?
He knows.
He knows. He has a confidence in who he is that carries us through a lot.
Yeah, I like it. Someday I'll meet him. Okay.
But yeah, it wasn't like, want. Like, seriously, I was trying to break up with you. I thought I was like going to like break your heart and never see you again. He's like, yeah, no, that wasn't going to happen.
I love it. I'm attracted to him now. Huh. So tell me about, we haven't really ever talked like in a deeper interview about some of your work experience, kind of your biographical details. We talk about the expertise. We hear your expertise that you've learned from those experiences a lot, but you were just with the Nancy Pelosi because you used to work for Nancy Pelosi, which it's got to be pretty cool because you have done a lot of public facing work. So a lot of people see your success on TV. So it must have been a fun reunion for someone like you to go back. You're a big shot now. What did you used to do? And what was this reunion like?
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say that. And it was the first time I had walked through that very specific entrance in almost 20 years.
In the Capitol building?
In the Capitol building where I was like a 22-year-old, like 21, 22-year-old staffer, first real job. Yeah, first like real job of consequence. That wasn't like the job where you just learn how to do stuff. Mm-hmm. First real job of consequence. I was like a junior press staffer dealing with media and planning and doing events. And I just remember that feeling of walking back in and being like, wow, all of the stuff is familiar, but I'm a very different person right now. And it actually feels good to walk in and look at the places where certain memories and events happened and look at that with perspective and hindsight and not feel, oh, those are the best days of my life. Like, what's my life become? Right. It was, oh, wow, actually, I was really intense and maybe a little psycho about how much I cared about my job and had like almost no social life. And oh, all of that stuff has been resolved and I learned a lot and it was great, but also not like, I want to go back. I miss it so much. It was like, it was great for what it was in a moment in time. And so we had arranged prior to knowing we were going to get our photo with the speaker that my old office mates and I were going to meet up. And we kept in touch vaguely over the years, but I hadn't been to a reunion event, at least since I've had kids, if not longer. And so we were texting, we arranged, we take our office photo of 4 people standing on the steps of the Capitol. We walk in, we see our old office, we're laughing. We bump into people along the way. And as I walk out to go upstairs to go get in line for the photo, I walk up and I see outside of my old office, there was an exit. And that exit used to have 2 Capitol police officers there, one of whom I thought was really cute when I was 22 and 23. And apparently he thought I was really cute too. And my same colleague who I was walking with was the one who was trying to egg us on to actually somebody, one of you, ask each other out, like, what the hell is going on here? And so I walked by that exit and walked up. I was like, oh my gosh, do you remember that guy? And she's like, oh yeah, you guys were so silly. You were so cute. And it was so funny. And she's like, I'm so glad you actually ended up going out. Whatever happened? I'm like, oh God. I was like, it was so, I don't want to talk about it because I'm just so embarrassed thinking about how here's this nice guy who one day as I'm walking out and I say, hey, what are you doing this weekend? And he's like, nothing, long weekend. I'm like, okay, guess I'll see you later. And I walk out the Capitol steps and I suddenly hear somebody go, nay, nay. And I turn around and here's this police officer running down the stairs, takes off his hat, holds it like this and goes, so, would you be interested in maybe sometime? I was like, do you want to go out sometime? He goes, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, let's do that. I was like, awesome. What do you want to do? He's like, yeah, we could, movie, dinner. I was like, great. Here's my number. Right. It was just this lovely, endearing, but also gave me such a confidence boost. They're like, oh, he actually does think he wants to hang out with me. And, oh, it's not just me. Cool. Okay. So I'm thinking all of this. This is all I'm literally blushing again several days later, thinking about this as a 40-year-old married woman with children, remembering this moment, coming up the steps, turn the corner, get in line for the photo. And she's, my friend is still chatting with me. And I hear again, nay, nay. And I turn and I'm looking, I'm like, what? He goes, it's me. Says his name. And I go, oh, yes, it's you. Hey, he goes, you look the same. And I think, thank fucking God I just came off of a TV interview and I'm wearing a great dress and a full face of makeup because, oh my God, 20 years later, standing literally right there. And I was like, hey. And of course, the same friend, she's like, oh my God, how are you? Da-da-da, come over here. Let's talk. Hilarious. Totally egging it on because she's just having fun with herself at this point, right? She's in her 60s. She's like, let me have fun with these 2 young kids. And so we started catching, we chat, get my photo. Turns out he had left being in uniform. Turns out he was no longer plainclothes. He had gone into the protective detail for members. He was wearing the suit that you see around a lot of security officials. And he's one of her security leads, one of Pelosi's security leads.
Wow.
And he's the one who had to make the call, had gone down on January 6th, seen what was happening, heard the call to lock down the building, saw fellow police officers crawling in, wounded, eyes watering, not able to see anything. And he said, let's go. Runs up those same stairs, and says, get her out of here. Got to go. Had the route, they'd already moved the motorcade. He told me, I was thinking I need to make sure that we get her daughter and her granddaughter and thinking what route we're going to take, but we need to get her out.
Wow.
And it turns out if he had not said that, had not gone down there, seen that and come back up and made that call 2 minutes later, he saved her by 2 minutes.
Is it true that he learned his heroism from that one date with you? What happened on the date?
Oh my God.
Did you go out with him?
I did. We did dinner and a movie, and as I said, I was like, oh, we should catch up. He's like, yeah, let's like get coffee after something. And he's like, oh yeah, and so and so and so and so in your office. And I look at my friend, I go, this law enforcement memory is going to get me in trouble because if he's remembering all these names and all these staffers he's seen from all these 20 years, he remembers that date. And so apparently, we'd gone to see a movie and we'd had pizza beforehand. And I remember too, he's like, yeah, you really lit into me about my politics. I was like, oh, he goes, yeah, he's Hispanic. He's like, and I said, I was thinking of voting for George Bush. So here's this 24-year-old guy. I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking of voting. And I lit into him. I was like, I'm sorry, what? Why? Wait, where do you work? And do you know who I work for? And you know what we do? And this is literally, I spend my time lit into him about that. And then when we get into the car, this part I remember. I remember sitting there in the car and I just randomly was like, oh, so where's your gun? He goes, I have it on me now. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, I carry it strapped. It's like right here. And I was like, why? And he explains to me and I'm just like, wow, the police officer mentality of wearing a gun, that's just a thing. And I was like, okay.
On your date, he was wearing his pistol and you were shocked.
Yeah. And I was kind of like, but why? He's like, well, what if something happens? I'm like, yeah, what if something happens? You're going to get in a shootout? Like, I'm like, can you actually? He's like, well, I can arrest people. Like I can be there. I can be responsible. And my brain is thinking, I'm like wrestling with like, oh, it's just not something I have experience with. And like that kind of responsibility or what that means, this and that. This is what I remember. He remembers it as, he's like, yeah, he's like, because I asked him, I was like, so where's your gun right now? He goes, well, I learned two things from that. I said, what? He goes, don't talk politics on the first couple of dates in DC and never bring your gun out. And I started laughing so hard. I was like, wait, he's like, no, I'm not carrying it right. He's like, no, I don't carry it in private anymore.
Wow. What a crazy story. Thank you for sharing that. Wow.
What I'm saying is like, Pete, like in this moment of like reflecting on death, I'm suddenly confronting my 20-year-old self. I'm like, no one should have to do it that way, but it is also remarkably hilarious and heartwarming to see how far you can go and how much can change in your life.
It's an interesting, when things happen in a certain order, the way that they affect you. And it sounds like you lose somebody very close to you, then you go back and you kind of relive the last 20 of your years of your life, and you gain a certain perspective, it sounds like, and I think you said this in the email to me, and the question is like, what is that perspective? Because you said you feel happy, and how do you know? And how long will you be in this place until, I don't know.
I don't know, but I am happier than I expected, and it just seems weird to say that, given I just buried somebody dear to me, but I'm happier. I feel at peace. I feel content. And that just seems really remarkable to really ever have those moments when we're still striving. There's still so much we're trying to sort out as a family and where we are as a society. And just to have that moment and know that not only does this feel good, but it's okay if I feel differently tomorrow, right? I might be more sad later, but my fundamentals, I'm very blessed. Like I genuinely feel very blessed, and that there are people that I can touch back and think like, oh, yeah. Like, and I part of what I was thinking was like, I don't have the best friend of 50 years. I don't, right? There's a lot of people I've lost touch with.
Yeah.
So do I know who will be there? Who will be who will be those people that show up in that moment?
Probably nobody.
I'm like, just give me unmarked Potter's Field. That's fine. I just don't want. Just don't make a fuss, please, guys. Just don't do anything. I just want. But I realize that's important to me now.
Yeah, sure.
Those relationships are important to me.
Sure.
And how people feel after they've left your presence is really important to me. And that to me is a much better organizing and orienting principle for self than the like 22-year-old who wanted X, Y, and Z job.
Let me just ask you one more question based on this, and I'll let you go. Do you think it's like your kids are young, and I think people who have kids go through a similar experience in terms of friends, relationships that change as a result? You start meeting people and spending a lot of time with your kids' friends or classmates' parents, and sometimes they're even picking your friends for you in that way, which is a horrible way to go about things. So my question to you is, do you think, as a woman of a certain age, it's ever too late to make friends? Do you make new friends? Do you have close friends that you've made recently in your life? And How do you go about that? We live such weird, different lives now.
My husband has a great expression that he used, and it stuck with me as a good framework. People come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And not everybody has to be all three, and that's okay.
Ooh, man, I like him so much.
Isn't he great?
He really is.
Yeah.
Can you have him on? Can you guys come on together? Can you guys come on together and I'll interview you?
He's like, this is your thing, not my thing.
Damn it.
That's cool. Yeah, he also is that guy who's managed to have no digital footprint.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. I know we don't share a last name, so it's not like people can stalk and find him. Like, but he's like, no, I'm good. I don't. But that grounded, right? Like that sense of being grounded has always been good for me.
Yeah. My wife has been always very similar that way as well. But I think it's weird that your husband wears a Batman mask in the home. What's that about? How do you explain that?
It's the same Batman story, childhood trauma.
Nyyera, thank you for always being amazing and smart and brilliantly hilarious no matter what I throw at you, as you just proved. And let's talk again soon.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah, go thank her. Please go thank her. Nayyera Haq on Twitter. She'll see your tweets. Please, I beg of you to let her know how much that conversation meant to you, if it meant as much to you as it did to me. Love talking to Nyyera. Always great. She's so smart, thoughtful, and it was a great, I thought, personal conversation that would help folks. So, there you go. All right, go let her know. Now it's time to talk politics. Michael Cohen, who, of course, writes the Truth and Consequences Substack newsletter, which I am a paid subscriber to proudly. Always love talking to Michael. I think he's great, and you should definitely check out his books and everything that he is doing. Follow him on Twitter at SpeechBoy71. He still thinks it's a thing, Twitter. I do too. We're not giving up. We covered a lot of ground on today's conversation. I always love how honest he is. And I also love how sometimes he speeds up what he is saying and combines a bunch of words. I know what he's saying. I think you know what he's saying. I don't know. I just always think it's funny, and I just love talking to Michael. I don't always agree with everything he or anybody says. I know some of you don't as well, but I always love getting Michael's insight and including it into my conclusion of things. So here we go right now with Michael Cohen. All right, I've got him. I've pinned him down. There he is. I have a whole bunch of questions to ask you. So let's get to it. Can we get right to the truths and the consequences?
Let's get to the truth and to the consequences, my friend.
Okay, so I am watching what's happening with Twitter and Elon Musk like everybody else day to day. And I'm wondering what you think at this point the strategy is. A lot of smart people are analyzing what
the strategy. What are you seeing serious right now?
I thought you might think that there's a goal in mind that he has in mind that he's trying to do. No,
unless being an asshole is a strategy, I don't think there's a strategy at play here. That would be my view of this situation.
Okay,
because so here's my thing on this. He is basically pissing off half the Twitter user base, probably more than half, by being a right-wing troll,
right?
And mocking trans people and talking about prosecuting Dr. Fauci, just really irresponsible, stupid, right-wing, childish kind of stuff he's doing. He's pissing off half the user base, and I don't see how that doesn't affect his other businesses. I mean, I'm not going to buy a Tesla anytime soon. I probably would have a year ago or 6 months ago, but now I'll look for another electric vehicle, not a Tesla. And I don't know the people that he's trying to appeal to, right wingers, are all for buying electric vehicles. So I have no idea what he's doing. And I think, there's no logic to it. And I was joking earlier, but not completely. There is no strategy. If there is, it is a god awful strategy. It's like the Kirsten Sinema strategy of political.
Oh, I'm going to get to her.
Sure.
Yeah. And okay, a lot of people are saying that the strategy is he's clearly come out as a pretty hardcore right winger, even endorsing Republicans.
Sure.
And that is what you got to do to get engagement. It's why there's not a million liberal talkers with hundreds of thousands of followers and millions of followers and getting ratings all over. Like, that's what you do.
I don't know where the evidence is for that. I mean, I'd love to see it. But engagement's not what he needs. He needs advertising.
Right.
And he's losing advertisers, right? You can't give away ad time on Twitter right now. I give up. I really, I mean, and he's just kind of being a jerk. He's just kind of a jerk. I mean, I said earlier, I called him an a-hole, and I mean, I'll be nicer now, but he's being a jerk, and he's doing things that are purposely intended to inflame people. And frankly, you know, I don't think that seriously. And I think people who complain about Twitter being a bad place, like, just ignore him. He's trying to get your attention. That's what a lot of people do on Twitter.
You can't ignore him. That's like saying ignore Trump. They're the same. They're the two guys.
You can ignore him. You can ignore him. It's not easy, but you can do it.
Well, you can't ignore him if Twitter is something that you really like or need, and it's destroyed, and he's destroying it.
I mean, is he destroying it?
I don't know
that he is. I mean, the things about Twitter that I value, which is sense of community, which is being able to, as an aggregator, and finding interesting articles and interesting, you know, things that I wouldn't find elsewhere, it still plays that role. You know, I see Musk's tweets, and sometimes I'll make a joke about it, usually make a joke about it, or other times I'll just ignore it. I think something about Twitter that I find odd is that people impart way too much importance to what happens there, and they should just find a way to curate their experience so they enjoy it and it's pleasurable for them, and they ignore the stupidity. And there's a lot of stupidity on Twitter. And, you know, block people, mute people, you know, don't have people who are negative or are trolling on your feed, and, you know, it'll be a better experience. And frankly, the thing with Musk is, in a lot of ways, ignoring him is the best way to deal with him, because he wants to get your attention. He wants the attention that comes from trolling. And my view of it is, don't give it to him, because he doesn't deserve it. And we all have better things to do with our time.
I like your view, because I kind of feel the same way. There's a lot to criticize about Twitter always. There's a lot to criticize about what's happened to it since he's taken over. But it's still working pretty well for me.
It is. It is. It is for the most part. And I think, again, I mean, I'm not trying to I've been a big believer for a long time that people bitch too much about Twitter. Just find a way to enjoy the experience on there, or don't. But if you're just going to be on there and complaining about how Elon Musk is an a-hole all the time, you're not going to enjoy your experience there. Just, you know, it's like anything in life, right? I mean, don't do things that make you unhappy. Don't do things that make you sad. Don't pay attention to people who drag you down. So I think that's how I feel about Twitter, to the most part.
I like it. I like your attitude, Michael Cohen.
Yeah, I try.
Do you ever leave a place or a situation that's making you upset around people?
All the time.
You do?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I'd be hardly at Twitter, because I do rely on it for a lot of things. And I do appreciate the community. I've made a lot of people, I've made friends from people I've met on Twitter, you know, but if I find something is a negative experience for me, or something that's dragging me down, I'm just going to move on to something different. You know, I mean, I don't really spend time on Facebook much anymore. I used to be, so I'll give you an example. I used to be in a lot of listservs.
Okay.
And I used to find myself getting in arguments on listservs all the time. And I said, you know what? This isn't really enjoyable for me. So I'm just going to stop doing it. And I just stopped doing it. And, you know, once in a while I'll go on the listserv, but basically I just kind of walked away from it, because it wasn't an enjoyable experience for me anymore. And if Twitter becomes that way for me, then I'll walk away from it. But I find it's really easy to curate your experience on there and have it be positive, and not, you know, be dragged down by people like Musk. And but look, I will say this. I mean, what he's doing to the site is harmful, right? There's this huge increase in hate speech on there. And I think it is, I understand the logic of people who say, I don't want to be part of this anymore. I get that. I really do. Just, that's not me. But I do understand people who say, like, I don't want to be part of this because he's such a negative force, and he really is.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't blame someone for not wanting, and that's kind of what you're suggesting people do if you're not having a good time. But I think, just to underscore, you can curate an experience there. And while I who knows if the engagement that I get when I share, hey, today's show is up, or here's my thoughts on the World Cup, has changed, but I still get a lot out of going to read your tweets and other people whose timelines I get a good kick out of.
Yeah, me too. I do too. And I enjoy the experience of it. I mean, it's entertaining to me in a lot of respects.
Yeah. Okay. So one more quick thing, dude. Elon Musk shows up at a Dave Chappelle show, and
so what's up with Dave Chappelle? Why is he boosting this guy? What is up with Chappelle? Has just become annoying and not funny. It's a bad combination for a comedian.
I don't know that his stand-up has changed. I mean, it's definitely changed a lot, but I think Dave's always funny, even when he's being offensive. He's not always funny. Not always.
Not always funny.
But he's doing some kind of thing where he is on that wagon or in the lane of free speech for everybody pretty much all the time, even if you're Kanye West talking about Hitler. Like
exactly.
That is a wide lane of people that has overlap, political ideology overlap to some extent.
Well, look, and I think you saw this with this absolute embarrassment from Matt Taibbi. I know he's been on your show before.
We used to be very good friends, and then when I saw him on Michael Cohen, I'm talking Michael Cohen. I saw him on. I get my Jews mixed up. I don't know why I did that to you. Ben Shapiro. I don't know why I mixed up with him.
I mean, there you go.
And so he was on there, and he praised Matt Walsh. He said the left has completely lost its sense of humor about everything, and there's humor left with conservatives, and he praised Matt Walsh. I saw that today, and I was like, he is out of the phase of the cocoon. His butterfly wings are there. Yeah. They're not pretty. It's bad. It's bad. This version is very bad. I don't like it. So all that being said, whatever you're about to say, just go ahead and say it.
No, but him and Bari Weiss, I mean, they should be ashamed of themselves. It's what they've done is absolutely shameful. They are taking these. I mean, they're not journalists. They're basically doing PR for Elon Musk. They've basically been given these internal chats from, or whatever, memos, what have you, from Twitter. They are not reporting them. They're just regurgitating them on Twitter with a complete ideological bias. And Bari Weiss, I mean, God damn it. Like, basically what she's doing is she's saying, well, Twitter is shutting down speech because they, for example, shut down Donald Trump's account. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is the hill you're going to die on? Is Donald Trump's Twitter account? The guy who's basically fomenting an insurrection, who's threatening Mike Pence, that's the guy who you're going to defend as being a paragon of free speech? Give me a break. Have you got nothing better to do with your time? I mean, and look, why she's doing this? Because it gets her like thousands of likes and gets her people who will sign up for her ridiculous.
She's starting like a company, like
this, whatever. She basically runs a Substack that she doesn't really even write. That she basically, accepts pieces from other people. I don't think she even edits them. And I know Bari. She edited a piece of mine years ago when she was at Tablet. I thought she was a good editor. But what she's become is just appalling. I mean, and look, both of them, they're basically just doing PR for Elon Musk, and they're doing it in the way he wants them to do it. This is not journalism at all. It's PR.
If there were anything that were to come out of this, it would be basically, this is other people saying this, I'm hearing a lot of people saying this, the news story would be Twitter's internal moderation, conversation, debates released, right. And something about that, apparently.
Which, by the way, as far as I can tell, it seems as though they had a lot of really difficult debates about how to handle some of the speech that was on their website, which that seems like kind of not surprising or unusual. I mean, there's nothing in there that I find, unless you come at it from an ideological standpoint of viewing Twitter as shutting down speech, then there's nothing here to see. I mean, if you want to believe that, you will believe that no matter what these things say. And frankly, why is Musk doing this? He's ruining the brand of his own company. I mean, it's so bizarre. Because he's undermining Twitter's brand. He's undermining people's confidence in Twitter. And
he's going in and he's cleaning up a dirty company. He's showing you how dirty it is, and then he's going to make it better.
Do you think people find it like they're really happy that he's there, criticize the old Twitter for shutting down Donald Trump's Twitter feed? Sure.
I think some
I'm
people.
sure some right wingers think it's great. Yeah. I'm sure most people on that who I follow and who follow me were fine with that decision and don't really see this as a legitimate criticism of Twitter's former management.
Right.
But do you know any company where someone takes over and then basically shits all over people who used to work there?
No, certainly not. No. I mean, you can understand throwing people, taking over a company, firing people, replacing people, but the idea of publicly criticizing, it's just...
it's bizarre. I've never seen it before. It's absolutely bizarre.
So,
there's no logic to it.
The Twitter files. What if any, impact then do they have? Are we going to have to be hearing about this when Republicans take over the Oversight Committee in the House next year?
Well, what are they going to? Who cares? What are they going to do? Seriously.
Well, they are. I love your attitude.
Any of that stuff. They'll have some investigation no one will pay attention to. That'll basically get a bunch of right wingers that get outraged about it, and liberals that get outraged over the right wing outrage. It'll be the usual outrage fest on Twitter. I mean, who cares? I don't really.
The Hunter Biden stuff. You think none of that's gonna? It's the same thing.
Who cares? I mean, honestly, who cares? I mean, I just find the whole attacks on Hunter Biden to be gross and unseemly, and I will never write about it because this poor kid who lost his mother in a car accident, who was seriously injured, who's gone through drug and alcohol addiction,
lost his brother.
Right. Lost his brother.
His younger brother, and when he was little, and then his older brother.
He's had a lot of tragedy in his life.
Yeah.
Needless tragedy in his life, if no fault of his own. And I have nothing but empathy for him, and I don't care about any of these stories about his laptop or his love of porn or whatever. I don't care. I just don't. And I think most Americans don't care either. And you know what? Republicans want to go down this road. It's not going to help them politically.
Right. One narrative was that apparently there was pictures of Hunter Biden masturbating or something, his dick out, whatever, and they're mad that Twitter didn't release those.
Yeah, right. They complained because the Biden campaign wrote Twitter and said, take these down.
But they should do that. Everybody should write to.
Of course they should do it.
And say, don't publish these photos. They serve in the old days, if I had pictures of somebody, compromising pictures of somebody, a newspaper could confirm that they exist, but they wouldn't print them.
They wouldn't print them. No.
Or they would there would be a conversation about that, but generally speaking, they wouldn't print it because it serves no purpose for the public interest.
No, that's none.
Okay.
And I don't, the complaints about it are absurd. So I don't really care. I mean, I think a lot of these, I think the House Republicans are going to have a lot of investigations of Biden. I think they may try to impeach him. I have no idea for what. I think it will go nowhere, obviously in the Senate, and I think it will actually hurt them. But I will say this, I think it will happen. I think that, Kevin McCarthy wants to be speaker, and to get to be speaker, he needs to pacify, what I would call the jihadist wing of the GOP, which is the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the, Lauren Boeberts and, Paul Gosars of the world. By the way, I think it's sort of fascinating. Paul Gosar has the same name as the villain in Ghostbusters.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic thing.
Makes so much sense.
I could totally see Paul Gosar living in my refrigerator and coming out. Totally see that. I just think, nobody cares about this stuff, but the right wing does. And so I think he'll play to them because he has to win them over. And you've already seen this. He already said he was going to try to, impeach Mayorkas, the head of the DHS. Why? I have no idea. And nobody does.
They keep making this point over and over, and they keep getting dunked on about how many shipments of fentanyl they have stopped at the border. And you're like,
my favorite talking point. Joe Biden stopped 30 tons of fentanyl at the border. I'm like, well, that's actually kind of a good thing, isn't it? I mean, isn't that something positive?
What did you want him? Did you want them to let it in? What isn't the whole thing that it doesn't? Isn't all the money, the security is to say that things and people that we don't want to come in don't come in. So that's good, right? But
the border is not the border. The border is brown people, right? The border equals brown people. It doesn't matter. The facts are irrelevant. It's just a dog whistle. It's just, if I say woke, that means black people. If I say or trans people. If I say the border, it means brown people.
Did you see some one of those right wing networks anchors said he took his daughter to the American Girl a doll store, and he could not
look like his daughter.
He's beautiful. He said, "My beautiful 6-year-old." He said she's a normal 6-year-old white cute girl, and we couldn't find any American Girl doll that looked like her. It seemed, he said, I'm paraphrasing a tiny bit, but I'm getting close to it. He said it seemed like the whole store had been wokified.
Wokified.
There were dolls
of don't care about black people. Just say that. It would be so much easier.
There were dolls of every shade.
Oh my God.
They had different hair and hair color. That not one white dolly which by the way is impossible. It's mostly white dolls.
Impossible. There's no way that's possible.
Certainly not the main flagship store in Fifth Avenue. I went there way too many times when my daughters were young. One time I was waiting. When you're shopping with your kids, I just waited by the exit. I just couldn't walk around anymore. We'd been there so long. And I looked down and my fly was unzipped at the American Girl. I was like, no.
Wow. That's a hell of a story right there. Listen, I want to say the chances of there being no white doll at the American Girl store are equal to the chances that this Fox News guy, has a black neighbor. Those two things, no chance of either.
Yeah, he had one once, but he moved further out.
I shouldn't say that. I've heard some of his best friends are Jews.
Oh, well.
I've heard that, actually.
So let me ask you about, I started that. The midterms, you have a final take on the midterms. And so we could talk about Georgia. We talk about Warnock and Herschel Walker and the future of the Republican Party. But I know that you have a lot to say about Kyrsten Sinema 2 days after that historic runoff election, bringing the focus and attention back to her when she said she'd be leaving the Democratic Party and registering as an independent. What's going on there?
She's the worst. Honestly, she's the worst. She's bad at politics and she's a bad person. It's a hell of a combination. At least you can be a good person and bad at politics, or good at politics and a bad person. That's usually the way it goes. She's a bad person and she's bad at politics.
Why is she bad at politics?
Because she's basically forced to become an independent because she's pissed off Democrats in her state. I was making this point somebody the other day. Someone, a good friend of mine said it to me, but she's a loyal Democrat. She votes with Biden 9% of the time. And I made that point on Twitter too. She does. Here's the problem. It's the 7% of the time she doesn't vote with Biden that everyone knows her for and has come to define her and negatively define her. It's I get that you want to be independent and you want to create this independent, persona, but you need to pick your spots well. She has not picked her spots well. And what she's done is she has pissed off every Democrat in Arizona, it seems, to the point that she knows she can't win a Democratic primary. She can't. If Ruben Gallego, who's a congressman, runs against her, he will almost certainly defeat her in a primary. That's why she became independent. And basically, this is why she's a bad person. She's saying the Democratic Party, if you run against me in a three-way race, some crazy Republican like Terry Lake, Blake Masters is going to get elected.
For sure, they would get elected.
Is going to get elected. That's what she's doing. She's threatening her own party. Now, if I were Democrats, I would just say the hell with you and run anyway, because I think it's very possible her support collapses. Because I don't know where her constituency lies in Arizona politics. I mean, Smart made a good point. I saw somewhere I saw this, that if she's independent, Gallego can run as a normal Democrat, not as a liberal Democrat trying to take her on from the left. So that actually gives him a little more ability to, have a broader coalition of support. The thing is, who's her constituency? Democrats?
I don't know, but if she gets 1 or 2% of the vote, which is all she needs, you're gonna have Senator Carrie Lake.
I mean, her support has to completely collapse. She has to go be below 10%. Yeah. I mean, because you would think that, I think Blake Masters got 46% of the vote, 45% of the vote. I mean, which is kind of crazy considering that there's a more than even chance he once buried a dead body in the desert. I mean,
yeah, he sure looks like it.
I mean, of any person in politics who buried a dead person in the Senate and in the desert, it's that.
Yeah.
Him or JD Vance, I think one of those two. But
JD Vance might have paid someone to do it for him with somebody else's money.
That's true. Yeah, maybe. But the thing is that, so you could imagine a scenario in which some Republicans who voted for Blake Masters, maybe would vote for Kyrsten Sinema because they think she's independent. But so I think she might win some Republican support. I mean, what's weird about it is that her numbers. This is crazy. I saw this poll the other day. Her numbers among Republicans, fair abilities, are the same they are among Democrats. That's unheard of in this day and age. They're the same number. How is that even possible? It's crazy. So I just think that, the chances are if she runs, she might take some support from Republican, but chances are she takes most support from Democrats and from independents who lean Democratic and would cause Democrats the seat. I still say you run against her, you force her to be on the ballot and make a decision if she wants to be humiliated and see what happens. But, it's not a great situation for Democrats at all. At all.
Right.
Because I don't think, by the way, if it's Jess Sinema running against a Republican, I'm not so sure she wins either.
Right. I think that's quite possible and deeply disconcerting. However, you like to think that Warnock win gives a little bit of cushion.
No, it doesn't, because here's the problem for Democrats. They are in a terrible, terrible map in 2024. In fact, there's a great article today about how nobody wants the job of head of the DSCC.
Oh, wow, because it's going to be a really hard.
Yeah, you got Manchin, Sherrod Brown, and John Tester all in red states that Trump won on the ballot. I could imagine Tester, he's pulled out 3 races so far, maybe he can pull a 4th one out. If Manchin's on the ballot, maybe he wins. If he's not, it's a loser. Sherrod Brown, I don't like his chances. But that's 3 races you have to win. Plus, you got to protect the Arizona seat. You got Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. You got Jackie Rosen in Nevada. And meanwhile, on the Republican side, there's not a single vulnerable Republican. The most vulnerable one might be Ted Cruz or Rick Scott, and neither one of them are going to be vulnerable. So it's a terrible, terrible map for Democrats, and you need Sinema's seat. You can't give one away.
Did the Biden administration do the right thing with the prisoner swap and the WNBA star Brittany Griner?
Yeah, I don't even understand what the debate is about on this one. I mean, here's my question. What did the Russians get out of this? What is the big win here? You had Victor Bout, who's been an arms dealer, 12 years ago?
He's a broker. He's in arms. He's just a broker.
That was a dozen years ago. I'm sure the arms industry has moved on from Victor Bout. I don't understand what they got out of it. All they did was make themselves look bad. They're not going to get anybody to come visit Russia for the foreseeable future because you don't get kidnapped and sent to a gulag. I mean, I don't see. And frankly, if you have a chance to free somebody from a Russian penal colony, you have to do it. I mean, the problem is you're dealing with the Russians. The Russians are not ethical. They're not moral. They're not playing we have no leverage over them. We can't put more sanctions on them. We already put enough sanctions on them because of the Ukraine war. So I don't really know what else the administration could have done here. If the Russians say, this is the deal, Brittany Griner, Victor Bout, you're not getting the other guy back. You say no to that? How? How do you say no to that? I don't get it. Brittany Griner, who did nothing wrong, doesn't deserve to be in jail. So, in my view, this is not even a question about this. It was the right thing to do. And the Republicans are attacking her for it. I mean, it's whatever. It's politics. I get it. But it's gross.
All right, Michael Cohen. Anything else before I let you go that you're writing about, that you're thinking about, that I didn't ask you about?
Yeah,
those were the main.
I got one more thing.
Yeah,
here.
please.
Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, great guy.
So I'm sure you've heard the story. Ron DeSantis announced a grand jury to investigate the vaccine makers, Pfizer and...
Well, they had a whole panel yesterday, and he had experts, and it was televised. It was on camera, and it was it's very, very scary and dangerous what he's doing. So I'm glad you brought it up. Go ahead, your thoughts on it.
I mean, we're basically coming into the winter when COVID rates tend to go up. You're already seeing some of that happening already.
Hospitals are filled. You also have flu, which is also a vaccine that you can get. You have this RSV, respiratory virus, which puts a lot of young kids in danger.
No, and the problem is that we have a third of the country that's not vaccinated. I looked at the number today. I was curious about this. It's 68% of the country is fully vaccinated. You know what that number was in March? 66%. That's how much needle has moved.
Those numbers are got to be really hard to measure because the vaccination wears off after a certain amount of time, and so you're not necessarily as protected, and that's what you got. It does,
but the thing is that people are not getting vaccinated.
Yeah,
and people who don't want to, and this only makes it less likely they get vaccinated, right? Because he's telling them there are these terrible side effects, and we have to investigate it, as opposed to saying these vaccines are a miracle, which they are, and everyone should get one. So what I think is striking about it is that we talk about Donald Trump as being a horrible person and a horrible potential president and someone who spreads conspiracy theories. What's worse, him spreading lies about 2020 or Ron DeSantis literally causing people to not get vaccinated and die from COVID? I think DeSantis has that one.
Absolutely. I'm not sure the question should be what's worse. The question should be who's carrying on this type of very dangerous performance, which is what it is.
But I say what's worse because we talk about this in the context of Trump being like the worst, the worst candidate. He's awful. He's terrible. You have to get someone who's a more like reasonable Republican, right? That's what Republicans say. Ron DeSantis, the guy who's basically undermining public support for vaccines, who's an anti-vaxxer, worse. I just think it's one of these situations that like, it's incredibly disturbing to see him doing this, and he's doing it for obvious reasons. He thinks the way to get a Republican nomination in 2024. What does it say about the Republican Party, by the way?
The headlines are DeSantis seeks grand jury investigation of COVID-19 vaccines. And I can't begin to imagine the damage that this is going to do to the public debate around vaccines, which was settled. It was very settled for a long time, for the most part. And
but it's settled by a third country not getting vaccinated. But we need to be encouraging them to get vaccinated, not giving them more reasons not to get vaccinated.
This will give them plenty of reason. Just to, you don't have to read much or follow the story much, just to have enough of a question about something, about the vaccines and their ability to protect you. And people will, and they won't get vaccinated, and then we're in deep trouble. And then just the public support and faith in institutions in general, I mean,
the whole thing is just, it's just it's so unethical. And as well as I do, that Ron DeSantis does not think vaccinations will hurt you. He's doing this for political reasons.
Right. Something nice about somebody or this time of year, Michael, before I let you go, because I realize I've asked you specifically to trash several different people and things.
One more thing I'll say. Last night, I saw my all-time favorite movie on the big screen, Dr. Strangelove.
Oh, really? It's your all-time favorite movie?
My all-time favorite movie is Dr. Strangelove. My father's favorite movie. I love this movie. I've never seen the big screen before. I was playing it at a theater called the Metrograph in New York. If you've never seen it, you live in New York, check it out. It is honestly one of the funniest movies you'll ever see.
One of the funniest movies.
Stanley Kubrick, fantastic.
1964 black comedy film that satirizes Cold War fears of nuclear conflict between the Soviet Union and the United States. I've never seen it. Never seen that movie.
Wow. You, as a comedian, would love that movie. Seriously, go see it.
I'll watch it within the next week. Not on the big screen. I'm not going to do that. But.
All right, fine. Go rent it.
Yeah.
You will love it. You'll say, Michael, I can't believe I've told you in the years to watch it.
I'll go to the video store and rent it. Remember that? And there was a tape. You'd look behind it, and if it was there, it was there. And if it wasn't, you're like, damn,
I know, right? And they charge you to rewind it. You leave that shit. Unbelievable.
It is just, if you try to explain that to your kids, you won't be able to keep their attention. And if you do keep their attention, they'll just feel so much sadness. And like, you couldn't watch whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, anywhere.
Or hear any song you wanted to hear whenever you wanted, or find any piece of information whenever you wanted on your phone. Get it in these big encyclopedias you had. I mean, it was crazy. You had to like read the newspaper, who won the game the night before. I mean, it's literally like they can't grasp it. And my kids are like all the time, they're like, you have the internet, you have iPads. I'm like, we had nothing.
Right. And somehow trying to convince them then that it was like even a better time. I wonder. It's impossible for them to have that perspective. I thank you. I will let you go. I really appreciate it as always.
It's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for having me. Happy holidays to you and to your family.
Thank you, bud. All right, there he goes. Michael Cohen, everybody. And thank you to him. Go let him know he's still on Twitter at SpeechBoy71. Thank him there. Please, 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 as well as Nayyera Haq. So great for both of them to join me. Tomorrow I'll be talking to Virginia Heffernan. I'm also set up scheduled to talk to the ladies of the Hue. Hopefully we can make that work out. But lots of great stuff to come here on Stand Up before the week is over. Unfortunately, I won't be able to do the Hangout because I'm warming up the audience at the Intelligence Squared debate on Thursday night. Still try to figure out if I can do a Hangout either Friday or Saturday. I'd love to reschedule it because I hate to miss it. But as of now, it is off on Thursday. But I will talk to you one way or another. Thank you very much for listening today and subscribing. Go to standupwithpete.com right now. John Carroll, take us out, brother.
You gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off. offer your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience. Well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up.